that underlying all of it is really the work of Joseph Williams, and that's why Williams gets the last word, and my last word is a summary comment on a few of the points in Williams's book. It's a very short book. He has actually 3 different versions of this book, and the first version came out back in 1981-82. This is really the work that Williams went to rather than simply puzzling over the differences in people's approaches to errors. Particularly when he discovered after the first addition to his book the linguistic approach to understanding sentences called functional sentence perspective, or FSP. When he discovered that the principles he was giving basically as anecdotal style-based a la Schindler from that lecture on Schindler, that advice really could be backed up with objective research in functional sentence perspective linguistics, that was the big aha moment for him. And from the second edition of his book on, that became the center of it. In fact, he worked with a colleague in the linguistics department from the third edition on to make sure that it was everything that he was offering really had research behind it from functional sentence perspective. Some of the examples, however, have remained the same from that very first edition. And the key is this Little Red Riding Hood, which you'll see I adapted, as you'll recall, in the lecture that I gave as well. Once upon a time in 2A, as a walk through the woods was taking place on the part of Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf's jump out from behind a tree occurred, causing her fright. You ought to just hear several things as I read that represent this sort of backwards syntax that we find all the time in academic writing, in world of work writing, in writing that is first draft writing where people are not paying as much attention to the verbs as they are to simply getting important nouns piled up in the sentence. When he looks at this, he says, make the main characters subjects. And I'll look just at the one about the wolf's jump. The wolf's jump is in there, but as he says in the middle of the page here, the wolf is only attached, oops, got the wrong thing. The wolf is only attached to the simple subject. It is not the simple subject. This is Williams's way of saying what I have been saying when I point out that there's a mismatch between the grammatical subject, the simple subject, and the rhetorical subject, the who actually acts, in this case, the wolf. If we contrast it with to be, once upon a time Little Red Riding Hood was walking through the woods when the wolf jumped. Wolf jumped. It's that who does, actor, action, head first. In this case, it's at the head of the clause, right here, the adverbial clause, when the wolf jumped. There's the subject and there's the verb. That's the kind of structure we are looking for in much of what we edit. Now, you don't have to go through and make every single sentence have this structure, but you'll find that if you have a subject-verb complement or a subject-verb-object structure, your sentences will not only be clearer at the sentence level, but as we'll discover in about 2 weeks' time when we get back from spring break, when the sentences are written this way, the paragraphs are better as well. Going on to the next page, so here's the point, and these little point boxes are good ones. That sentence that seems wordy and indirect. It is wordy and indirect, but wordiness and indirectness are symptoms. They are not the causes. It's caused, the wordiness and the indirection is there because the actual rhetorical subjects, Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf, are not the grammatical subjects. It's that mismatch of grammatical subject with rhetorical subject that causes the problem. And I left this in because although he calls it academic writing, and he's looking at something on a discussion of the Federalist Papers here, the argument in regard to the destabilization of government by popular democracy was based on, in, to, of. It's that concatenation of prepositional phrases with no strong action verbs that we should recognize from parametric method and then remediate by putting in a strong who does at the left-hand side of the sentence, right up at the front. Federalists argued. That's what makes the second one stronger than the first. I know he calls it academic writing, but believe me, this is pretty standard writing in a lot of business settings as well, when we're looking at the white papers produced by businesses, and in particular when we're not looking just at academic writing, but the writing that comes out of venues such as the National Labs here in New Mexico. The here's the point boxes are very useful, and let's look at these too. Readers want actions in verbs, but even more, they want characters as their subjects. So, the bottom line for your editing, figure out who the subject is. And remember the lecture where I said make it mean something. Particularly when we're just editing single sentences, you may not be sure what it means, but you want the sentence to mean something clearly at the grammatical level. It's better to be clearly wrong than to leave something that no one can tell what is right or wrong. If you are clearly wrong in the context that we understand our editing, your work goes back to an author, and he or she is much more likely to see it and respond to it, and you'll have a basis for discussion. When you speak with such an author, you say, well, I thought we were talking about seagulls, so I took seagulls out of the end of the sentence. I put it in the subject position up at the front so that the grammatical subject would match the rhetorical subject, and I used this verb, which you had expressed as a noun in here. Seagulls seek, yada, yada, yada. Who does? It gives us a way to talk about sentence level editing.